Good morning. Are you having trouble priming a well pump, a shallow well pump, or a sandpoint pump? If you're having trouble, this is a video for you. In this video, I'm going to show you the steps of how to prime a pump, and I'm going to show you what the challenges might be. So there's so many videos on YouTube that talk about how to prime a pump, and I've seen them where they put water in the pump once, they turn the pump on, and it's good to go. And I know it doesn't always work out that way depending on your configuration of pump. And this one's a little bit more challenging than that, so I'll explain why and explain how we get this pump to prime. I'll also talk about what the common pitfalls are or what the issues are when you're trying to prime a pump. And we'll go over what those common items are and how to identify them. And then third, just through discussion, I hope to improve your overall understanding of what's going on with the shallow well pump system. All right, so we'll get started. I have a shallow well pump hooked up to a sand point in my basement. So the sand point well is basically a pipe that's driven down into the sand. This particular one goes down about 17, 18 feet to the tip. And it's pretty sandy here, so I was able to bore a hole through the concrete floor in my basement. It's a raised ranch house, so we're only about the grade of the ground is probably about here, so we're only down about 2 feet from the grade at the surface of the floor here. The sand point is down there, like I said, 17 or 18 feet. The first thing you want to check in your sand point well is, do you have water? That's the first step. So this setup here, we have the well pipe, a check valve, and then a short distance of pipe to the shallow well pump. So the pump pumps from the intake is here, the output is here. There's a pressure tank. This output goes into this copper pipe, which feeds up through the wall here, goes along through the ceiling to the front and the back of the house. There's spigots in the garage, and it also runs a sprinkler system. So back to the first step. First step is to make sure you have water. So you want to check see if you have water in your well, and the easiest way I found to do that is to use a string with a heavy nut attached to it. And you can drop this down. You want to make sure you don't lose the string, but drop this down into your well and listen for the water. Okay, right there. Right there is the surface of the water. So I can measure, using the string, I can measure that, and I can also I know that the well is 17 or 18 feet deep, but if I didn't know that, I could drop the string right down to the bottom until it stopped, falling down by gravity. So I'll just get that water level. Okay, so water level is right around there. I can pull this string out, throw it on the floor, and I can measure this out with the tape measure. My water level is about 12 feet down from the top of that well. So the well being 18 feet deep, that gives me about 6 feet of water, which is a pretty good setup for a sandpoint well. You want that level of water to be just higher than your screen by about 3 or 4 feet would be ideal. Because as you run your pump, you're going to kind of draw down the water around the well point in kind of a cone-shaped drawdown area, and so you want to have some water table above the bottom of the sand point. On the other hand, you don't want it to be too far down. Like, you don't want it to be down 25 feet, and then you got to pull the water up farther, because your sand point is only there'll be pressure pushing down on the water, but the sand point, the mesh is only 3 feet, so that's going to be way down there, and there'll just be more resistance to get it up. Okay, so first step is to make sure you got water in your well, and if you have water, that's a great first step. Okay, so you have water in your well, you've established that. The second step, you want to make sure you have flow. And flow meaning water can go from the surrounding substrate, the dirt or the sand, into the well pipe and up into your pump. And so the way to check that is if you have water flow going down, you know that you will also have water flow going up. So what I do to check is I take my garden hose, I've attached it to my laundry tub faucet, and I'll put full force water down the pipe here. And usually if the flow is slow, which it was a couple days ago, after putting the hose down here, full force, the water comes up the pipe and eventually gets to the top here. And then I turn the hose off and I can see how fast the water drains down. If you get water coming right to the top here and it takes like a long time to drain down, you know your sand point is plugged up. Now the other day, about 2 or 3 days ago, I noticed that the flow wasn't great, so I took the cap off. I did this test where I was putting full force water down here. After about 15 seconds, the water came up and it went down slowly. And it went down probably at a rate like this. That's fairly slow for this particular setup. If you have it like so you can see the water sitting here and very, very slowly going down, your point is really plugged up. So with the situation that I had where it was kind of going down slowly like this, what I did was I poured 1 gallon of vinegar, regular white vinegar, down the point, and I listened to it. You can hear it bubbling, and it's eating away at some of the mineral deposits that collect around the sand point. I left it for 24 hours, and then I came and I put another ½ gallon of white vinegar again down the sand point, and I could hear it bubbling, sizzling a little bit down there, so it's eating away at the minerals. I left it for another 24 hours, and then here we are today. When I use the hose on basically as much flow as I can get out of the hose, I cannot, after even like 2 or 3 minutes, I do not have the water level come up to here. So it is flowing out of the sand point just as fast as I'm putting it in there. That is good flow. That is a good situation for a sand pipe. If the water, for a sand point, if the water's going out, then I know that the water will be coming in just as fast. If you use the vinegar and you can't achieve good flow, there's a couple more aggressive steps that you can do. They sell these acid tablets called New Well, I believe it's called NU Well. They're like acid tablets. They're slightly smaller than a golf ball. They come in a little jar. It costs a little bit of money, about $50 or something. You put those tablets down there, and it's a little bit more aggressive acid to eat away the mineral deposits. You can do that. I know that some people use muriatic acid. Muriatic acid is a strong acid. It's designed for pools. I'd recommend be very cautious with that. You can injure yourself with muriatic acid. That's a lot more aggressive. And in an enclosed space like this, you can definitely cause some gases to come up, which can overpower you. So you can research that if you want on the web, but I would not recommend muriatic acid because it is so aggressive. And then finally, the fourth option you have, if you have no flow, is to pull the point out. And probably about every 6 or 7 years, I do pull the point out. I use it in the summertime almost every day, every other day really, with the sprinkler system, and then miscellaneous hose work. So it does see a lot of water flowing, but every 6 or 7 years I have to pull the point out. It's a bit of an operation. You get a jack and you lift it up and take each section apart, and then you can examine the point. And usually the point, the mesh is so plugged up that you can either soak it or scrub it or just replace it. But that's pretty major. That's a pretty major event for getting your sand point unplugged. So if you have water flow, just by testing with the hose, if it goes down and runs out, then you're in good shape. Okay, next thing you want to just be mindful of is your check valve. So this is a check valve, prevents the flow from going back down, allows the flow to go this way. A foot valve is an alternative. It works similar, except the foot valve goes at the bottom of the pipe. And you usually use a foot valve, not in a sandpoint situation, but in a situation where you might have a, let's say like an 8-inch diameter well pipe, and you have water down at the bottom of this well, and you put a pipe down there that's like separated from the dirt, then you'd maybe use a foot valve. Or if you're at the cottage and you have a lake, you have a long pipe, you might have a foot valve at the bottom of your pipe that's in the lake. So a foot valve works the same as a check valve, except it's at the bottom, allows the flow one way, prevents the flow from going back out. And if you find that you can get the pump to prime, but the next day it's not primed and you have to prime it again, then that's a pretty good sign that your check valve or your foot valve is not working. It's not holding water, and very slowly the water seeps back out and goes out. You want to check your check valve and your foot valve, make sure they're functional. Basically, to check this to see if it's holding water, I could put water in this pipe, or I could top it right up to this level here and leave it for a few hours, come back. If the water's still there, okay, I know my check valve is holding the water. Okay, fourth item you want to check for. If you're having trouble priming your pump, you want to check for any kind of leaks on the vacuum side. So the pump is here. This whole side is the vacuum side, or the suction side. This side is the pressurized side. If you have a leak over on the pressurized side, you're going to have water squirting out somewhere or dripping out. If you have a leak on this side and you're running the pump, it's going to be sucking air in, and that's harder to detect, and that'll affect your prime. If you have a bad leak over here, let's say I open this faucet up and it was leaking air in, you would never prime this pump because it would just be sucking in air. You'd always be getting air into the pump chamber. So check for leaks. I mean, to check for vacuum leaks, you could pressurize this system with air or water and examine that. Another way is when you start to pump up, if you listen closely over here, you might hear a vacuum leak. They're a little bit trickier to find, but just be aware if you have a vacuum leak on the suction side, it's going to be hard to prime the pump and to maintain prime. All right, I'm going to talk a little bit about what happens when you're priming a pump. So this style of pump, shallow well pump, it's very efficient at moving water. So there's an impeller in there, spins around through centrifugal force. It draws water in here, it throws it out to the surrounding housing here, and eventually forces that water up and out through the pipe here. A pump is efficient at moving water. It is terrible at moving air. So that's why when you turn your pump on and it's just running air, it doesn't create a strong enough vacuum over here to suck the water up. That's why you need to put water in here. When you put water in this chamber, you fill it right to the top here. You're priming your pump, you're filling the water all the way up here. Basically, you have water in this pipe and it comes down to this check valve. That's as far as you're going to go when you're putting water in to prime the pump. You turn your pump on, it'll suck the water out here and put it into this pipe. Some might go in your storage tank, and some might go in the output pipe up the wall. As this water moves through this pipe, you create a vacuum that pulls water, draws basically water up this pipe. Now, you might recall this pipe is, there's 12 feet of air in this pipe from here down to the surface of the water. So when I fill this chamber up with water, I'm creating a little suction here that's worth about, maybe 2, 3, or 4 feet, if you consider all the volume of water in here. 2, 3, or 4 feet of suction to pull the water up. The closer this check valve is to the inlet of your pump, That's the smaller that piece of suction that you're going to achieve when you prime the pump and turn it on. That means it's going to be harder to prime a pump the closer you have the check valve to the inlet of the pump. If you have a cottage, you might have 50 feet of pipe, between here all the way down the shoreline to the lake, into the lake, to the foot valve. That pump's going to be a lot easier to prime. Okay, so when you're priming this pump, like I said, there's a section of pipe here. You're going to draw some water up here. Each time you draw water up here, it's going to bring the water up the pipe each time you run the prime cycle. This pump usually takes, I'm going to say, more than 3 or 4 prime cycles of filling the chamber, drawing the water to pull the water up. It'll take more than 3 or 4 times because it's this 12 feet of air here that you gotta draw the water up. There's a limitation of a shallow well pump. You can only suck water, create vacuum to push the water or suck the water up 25 feet, because you can only draw the pressure down so far, create so much vacuum to get to 0 atmospheres of pressure, 0 kilopascals, 0 atmospheres. And once you've achieved that, you can't make any more vacuum. That's like a perfect vacuum. And that corresponds to about a draw of 25 feet. So if your pipe is farther down than 25 feet, you will never prime. Like, you gotta start pushing the water at that point to get up. You can push water up 200 feet, 500 feet. You can push water up. That's a different style of well, where you have a bigger well casing and you put the pump down at the bottom of the well. Might be, your well might be 200 feet deep. You can push the water up a long ways. But as far as sucking the water up, 25 feet is about the limit. And it's all about perfect vacuum. Once you get to 0 pressure in there, that's a vacuum, perfect vacuum. That corresponds to a draw up of about 25 feet. You just simply cannot go negative vacuum because, well, that's a thing about physics, it's a law of physics. You can only go down to 0 pressure. And it's all relative to atmospheric pressure. So the atmospheric pressure around here basically is pushing the water down, and when you create the vacuum, it brings the water up. Okay, so we're going to get into priming this pump. First thing I'll do is I'll put the cap on this T-fitting over here, seal this up. I've got my Teflon tape on the threads here to make a nice seal. I don't want any vacuum side air leaks because that is frustrating, and will make priming this pump difficult. This pump has a plug, and I just plug it in right here. So once we get going here, well, actually, I'll explain what's going to happen. So I mentioned earlier that the pipe here goes up the wall, and so that actually works to my advantage here. There's a faucet outside that I currently have open. You want to have the faucet open outside to have as little resistance pushing the water out as possible. The fact that the pipe goes up here higher than the pump works to my advantage, because what will happen here is I'll put some water in here with the hose. We'll fill up this chamber. It'll fill right up to this fitting here. When the pump is primed, I'll pop this valve in, or this gauge in this fitting, and we'll be done. But the first time I turn on the pump, it'll suck the water out. It'll push it down here. It'll push it, basically start pushing it up this pipe. Once it has a air lock here, the pump will be spinning. It won't be producing any more suction. It'll just be making like a fan noise. And at that point, what I'll do is I'll unplug the pump. I'll be holding my thumb here. There'll be a slight pressure, but not too much. I'll take my thumb off. The pressurized air will come out. It'll be letting out air as this basically as the water flows back down. It'll flow back into here as I'm letting out the pressurized air, because I've got some head here. I've got some water in this pipe. It's in the wall. Once the water comes back into this chamber, it comes up to here, starts spurting out water, then I'm going to plug that pump back in. So basically I've like re-primed the pump using the water that's in the pipe that's higher than the pump, just by letting out the air. And because I've done this a few times, I know what to expect here. I'm just going to let the air out, let that water come back in, and then I'll plug the pump in. It'll shoot the water through the output, through here again, and it's going to draw up another foot. Once I have an airlock again, I'll unplug the pump, I'll let the air out, then I'll seal it back up with my thumb, I'll plug it back in, and we'll keep doing that cycle until the water comes all the way up, and then it catches. Once it catches, it makes a funny noise, like a different noise. You'll understand when you're priming your pump when it catches. If you didn't have the situation where your water runs back into your pump through gravity, you would have to refill the chamber each time. So it can be time consuming, but doable, but time consuming. You just have to take your time, refill the chamber each time. And depending on how big your ratio is between your check valve and the distance down that pipe to the water, let's say this check valve is here, I might have to do that 20 times. If the check valve is here, okay, maybe it's, I don't know, 10 times. If your foot valve is way down there and you can fill up this whole chamber with water, maybe it's only one time and you're good to go. Okay, that's enough talk about pumps. Hopefully you get the idea. I'm going to start putting some water in there to prime the pump. Okay, so I have the water filled up to the top of that fitting. So you can see this chamber's full of water now. This pipe down here, this pipe into here is probably full. All this pipe in here will be full. I'm gonna turn it on here. And we'll see how it goes. So I gotta get my gauge ready so that I can reach it to put it on, because I'm gonna see if I can reach it and put it on without having a huge flood. Okay. to build up like 60 psi or anything with my thumb on here. Let's put a little bit of air pressure. Okay. Hopefully I didn't get the camera. Okay, good. Now the gauge is going to go on here. I'll just snug this up for now. Alright, you might recall the tap is on outside, so the water pressure should be going down slowly here. But it allows the pump to prime a little bit easier if you have no back pressure on the pressure side of the system. Okay, so let's watch this gauge as we put in the pump, and you'll be able to tell if it's primed. Alright, so we're at 25 psi and we're climbing. 30, 35. Our cutoff pressure of 50 psi. It's slowly dropping now due to the faucet being open. I'm going to go close the faucet here in a moment, and I'll kind of wipe down the pump, dry it off, and then I'll check for any leaks. Okay, that's about it for a video on how to prime a pump. Just a few tips, I guess, if you have trouble getting your water to come up, but you know you have water and you have good flow. Another method that I've seen is for someone to put like a pitcher pump, you know, the old style pitcher pumps. You could put one right on this fitting here, for example. That is a manual vacuum generator by the lever action that generates vacuum. I've seen people do that. I don't have a pitcher pump to use, but they're pretty effective at pulling the water up. You can get past your check valve. I mean, once you have water here, you put water in the pump chamber, and it should be one shot. You turn it on, it'll go. That's one option. I've seen people use other styles of pumps that draw vacuum. Like this style pump is efficient for moving water, not efficient for moving air, but different styles of pumps that are self-priming do create a large amount of vacuum and can be used. So some can be run by drills. Self-priming pump that runs by a drill, for example, you could put a fitting here and attach that. You'd want a valve so you can valve it off, you know, take your pump off or whatever when you don't need it for priming. But you could certainly use a self-priming pump on this side just to get things started if you're, you know, winterizing or summerizing your cottage or something like that, and you don't want to be messing around with the hose or the pitcher of water for many times, like 10 times or whatever it took there to get that pump to prime. You could certainly get an alternate pump that is self-priming to fill the suction side with water and then just go. So I have another video on replacing the bearings and the mechanical seal on this pump. So this was a fresh rebuild. The bearings were shot on this pump and it was making a terrible noise, loud screeching noise. So I've just replaced the bearings. It sounds a lot better now. And I also replaced the mechanical seal, so it should be good to go for many years, like 3-4 years probably with no issues. I do have a video, so if you want to see that, please click on the link at the end, and please click like and subscribe to my videos. Thanks very much. Have a great day.